Welcome to Up Close and Empowered with host Sonna Johns. Over the next hour, you'll hear from Sonna and her guests on how you can become more empowered through life's most challenging situations. Sonna's journey through her own transformation has inspired her to awaken you to your divine power.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sonna Johns on Up Close and Empowered. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope that after hearing some of the stories of my guests and their courage, that it will inspire you and empower you in some way, and realizing that you have the power to overcome life's most difficult challenges. And today's guest is a true testament to this. And I am really honored and excited and inspired to have Heather on the show. And I'll tell you a little bit about her. So when I met her recently at a gathering at the She Hive. So She Hive is a women's organization. It's a platform for community and workshops. And it's just a great little organization nationwide. And so we met at this gathering, and I just remember her having this bright energy. She was just, very positive, very grounded. And she started to tell her story. And I'm listening, and my mouth was just like really, and she wasn't done. I mean, she kept going on and on with her story. And I thought to myself, oh my God, like this woman has been through this much, and has this positive energy about her. I was just floored. Truly, I was just blown away. And I thought to myself, in that moment, I have to have her on my show. So I'm so glad to have her here today. So just to tell you a little bit about her. So Heather Hall is a speaker, a writer, coach, and entrepreneur. Diagnosed with cancer first at age 21, Heather quickly learned the impact a positive mindset had on her life. Now a 3-time cancer survivor, she is passionate about helping others transform their mindset during their most difficult challenges. She is a passionate change maker and meets with state and federal legislatures. She leads advocacy trainings. She's been interviewed about her work by the media, blogs, and much more. She's spoken at multiple events across the country. She's led sessions and programs relating to transforming your mindset. She also brings over 2 decades of experience in public relations, marketing, philanthropy, leadership, and advocacy in multiple industries, including healthcare, nonprofit, finance, and education. And she also owns a communications consulting firm, Three Oaks Media. For Heather, beyond cancer meant not letting, this is what I love when I read her bio. She said she wasn't going to let this disease run her life or tell her how to live. And she had made that decision that she was going to live her life the way she wanted to. And she said, it's looking beyond cancer to find the simple joy and gratitude in every day and making choices based on creating the life that I wanted. And when she made this decision, she started receiving messages from cancer survivors, caregivers, but many other people that loved hearing her authentic story, and also how authentic she was about sharing her good days and her bad days. And it helped them to relate to their challenges and help them to overcome their situations as well. So Heather believes that this is a reminder that we're all connected and that our messages of hope and optimism can make a positive impact in the world. She says, quote, "It is a messy, sometimes terrifying, mostly beautiful, joyful, and wild life. And I appreciate and embrace every minute that I am blessed to be alive," unquote. I always get a little choked up when I read that. Oh my gosh. So I want to welcome Heather Hall to the show today. Thank you so much, Heather, for being here.
Thank you. What an introduction. I was like, who is that woman you're talking about?
Yeah, well, you
So
deserve it. You deserve it.
thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Yes. So I know there's a lot of people listening to the show today, and people that have experienced, either having this disease or knowing somebody that has. And, your story is just so inspirational. And I want to let the listeners know a little bit more about your background. Like where were you before age 21 when you first got diagnosed? Tell us what your life was like.
Sure. It was, well, I was, in college. So living the life of a young adult college student. I was up at Central Michigan getting a degree in journalism. and I joined a sorority. I was in Alpha Chi Omega. So really just loving life, to be frank with you. I grew up with two amazing parents, and I have two sisters. So I'm the middle daughter. We're all super close. So between being in college and then coming home, I grew up in Clawson, small town, and, coming home and seeing my family and everything, life was really good. I had big plans for myself once I was graduating. I'd set these goals for myself, and I was really excited to get on with my adult life.
Right. And aren't you into horses? Wasn't that your passion?
Yes. I I think that was like the third word I said was horse. And so my parents really, they let me start riding horses when I was 9. Loved it. I think I was 12 or 13, my horse trainer invited me to work out at the barn on Saturdays. So I always look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, like here I was, 12, 13-year-old young girl. And I dedicated almost every single Saturday to being out at the barn. I would go out there and I would help, whether it be filling their water buckets or, cleaning saddles or doing whatever. And I would earn another hour of riding, or however, long they would let me ride. And it really just taught me so much responsibility and love. But that was my passion. I started riding hunter jumpers. So, I didn't own my own horse, but thankfully my trainer saw enough of a talent in me that she would go to other people who owned horses, and I started showing other people's horses and just really loved every minute. They were they're just my spirit animal. To me, they symbolize beauty, freedom, calmness. I just loved everything about them. So when I went off to college, I looked it up. I found a farm that was close to the campus, and I just asked them if I could come out and do something. I'm like, I will work for free. I will just do whatever. But if I could just be around the horses, and they invited me out there, kind of watched me ride a little bit. And then I started going out there. I got to watch some of their babies be born. I saw some beautiful foals be born, like such a phenomenal experience. And by the time I was diagnosed, I was exercising racehorses too. So a lot really phenomenal experiences that I have had.
So tell us about that. When you did get diagnosed, or what happened? How did you know? What were the symptoms? What were you going through?
Sure. Well, I, was 21, so I had some random knee pain off and on in my knee, but I was running probably 4 or 5 days a week. I was riding horses probably 3 days a week at that point, jumping 5-foot fences on a horse, like all of these things. And so it was kind of random pain. It would come off and on in like the weirdest way. And I could never quite describe the pain to my mom. And even to this day, it's funny enough, 25 years later, I can still remember what it felt like, but it's hard to describe. But, my mom, to her credit, she would make appointments with orthopedic doctors. And then I would call from college and say, sorry, I have a sorority function, or I have an exam to study. And then she'd cancel. And this went on about 4 or 5 times until, she said, let's just come when you're ready to come home, we will make an appointment for you. And then one day I was up at school and I rode horses. And when I dismounted, my knee gave out and I landed on my butt. And so I was like, oh, that was awkward and embarrassing. I don't know what happened here. And then the next day I went running, and for the first time, my knee gave out. And it was really difficult to get back to my apartment at the time. So of course I called my mom all frustrated. And again, didn't think anything of it. We just assumed it was being super active and probably injured it somewhere. So I went to a walk-in clinic off the campus, and he took an x-ray, asked me if I'd ever had any issues. I said no. And it's interesting, sitting in that clinic, again, that, young adult mindset where I was like, TikTok, I got things to do, because he came in and said, I'm going to send your x-ray across to the hospital just to get a second opinion. And I was like, okay, but I got to go ride a horse. I got to go study for an exam. And he's like, okay. So he came in and told me that he found something on the x-ray, and he asked me if I'd ever considered losing my leg. And of course, 21. And I was like, what?
Wow.
If you're 21 or however old you are, I mean, that's not typically a question you get asked. Now, he did say afterwards, because of course, when I called my mom hysterical, at the clinic crying, because he said, we need to get you. He knew where I live. So he's like, we need to get you downstate so you can get in to see a specialist. And went home. And it turned out, honestly, what really saved my life and my leg at that time was that he had done a residency in radiology. So he happened to kind of know what he was looking at when he saw it on an x-ray. And apparently that doesn't typically happen or always happen. But it turned out that I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, which is an aggressive form of bone cancer. So within 2 weeks, I had a biopsy and started chemotherapy. And for the next 13 months, I was in chemo, and I had 3 months of chemo, and really intense, like really aggressive chemo. I was inpatient for every single treatment. So I would be admitted to the hospital on a Sunday. I'd go home on Thursday. The following, like Monday, I would be admitted, go home Thursday. The following Sunday, I'd be admitted and be discharged the following Saturday. And then I would hopefully get 3 weeks off and then start it all over again. So I did 3 months of chemo, and then I was fortunate enough to be able to have a limb salvage. So he was able to save my leg. He removed the upper part or the lower part of my femur and the upper part of my tibia and my knee and replaced that with titanium. And then I had more chemo just to kind of make sure all of the cancer was gone. So it was intense. Like I said, 13 months of fully of treatment. I had to learn how to walk again. I had over 30 blood transfusions in that time. It was crazy. So, but the good news is that, I mean, the cool thing that happened was when I was diagnosed, I was 3 months shy of graduating from college, and I had busted my butt to get through school in 4 years. And so I went to my advisor at the time, and it turned out my advisor was a cancer survivor. And that was, he said, we're going to graduate. Like, it's not.
I was going to ask you if you were still in school at the time that you were doing this. I mean, were you able to keep up with everything?
Well, I was supposed to do an internship, actually in Lansing and for a political party. And I was like, there's no way I can go. I'm inpatient treatment. So he was great. We just kind of rewrote my internship where I wrote papers instead, which was actually really cool for me because I was a journalism major. So I had no problem doing that. But I ended up graduating. I was in between chemo treatments. I had a wig on. I was on crutches. I got my diploma through, and that night my family packed me up, moved me home, and I ended up in the hospital for 17 days with an infection. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, but I got that degree. And thanks to my parents, I think the entire hospital knew I had that degree because they were so proud and happy.
Oh my gosh. And all at 21 years old. That is, yeah.
It was a life-changing moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that there's more to it. So then what happened? Take us between, the age 21 and then the next time that you were diagnosed.
Yeah. So finished treatment and went on for a couple of years, just kind of tried finding my way as a young adult cancer survivor. So not only did I have the typical young adult things to face, I was facing, being a cancer survivor also. But then a few years later, I was in my late 20s when I noticed, I'm a redhead, fair skin, moles and freckles. So I noticed it looked like a change in a mole on my leg. I went to my dermatologist. He said it looked fine to him. And I was like, okay, that's, all right, well, whatever. Well, a month later, I thought, no, something like it looks like it's different. It looks bigger. It looks this. So I went back in and I told him, you have to take this mole out. I'm not, even if it comes back normal, now I've stared at it and now I'm not comfortable with it. So he took it out, and lo and behold, I got the phone call that it was melanoma in situ. So in situ means that it was contained in the upper level of the mole in the skin. So I went back in and had a surgery, and then thankfully that was it. I get monitored, pretty regularly by a dermatologist to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And then life, went on. And when 5 years ago, in my early 40s, I went in for my annual mammogram. So quick plug, please make sure you get your annual mammograms and don't dismiss those. But I went in for my annual mammogram, and they found a shadow on the mammogram. So I went back in for another, and then they wanted to do an ultrasound, and then turned out that I had early stage 1 breast cancer at that point. So that mammogram saved my life. And with that, thankfully it was early. My doctor had told me that it was, smaller than the size of a pea or half the size of a pea, but I ended up doing chemotherapy, 4 rounds of chemotherapy, outpatient, thankfully, and then 16 rounds of radiation.
Wow. Wow. So
Yeah.
where were you at that time? Were you married? What happened with the relationship and your marriage? And maybe talk a little bit about that, about how that impacted you.
Well, I was divorced at that point. So I was single. But you know what was interesting is I actually it really that was a tough cancer. I mean, there's no easy cancer, but at that stage of my life, I felt like I had just rebuilt my whole life and I was in
Hmm.
a really, really good place mentally, physically, emotionally. I felt like the healthiest in all those areas I've ever felt in my life. So to get that diagnosis was like a punch to the gut. And I just honestly felt like my whole heart shattered. It just that one took a little bit of definitely had to dig deep within myself for the mental capacity and to really overcome that to say like, okay, this is it. And what are we going to do with it?
Right. But I remember you telling me that your life took a little bit of a change with your marriage and your relationship based on these illness, this disease that you had. And maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was thankfully, pretty healthy when I was married, but it still, of course, played. I mean, all of my relationships, quite frankly. I mean, having cancer, it definitely impacts it.
Right.
Whether you're married, you're dating, whatever, because the thing is like, yes, we all have a history, but for me, especially having a rod in my leg, I do have some limitations. So when I meet someone who wants to go skiing or run a
Hmm.
marathon, it's like, oh, I can't do that. And so I do at times feel like I have to disclose a little earlier than maybe somebody else. And I also was unable to have children. So of course that impacted relationships and my marriage, just say we weren't able to have children. I mean, we definitely could have adopted or looked at those areas, but
Hmm.
even that's hard to think about when people, I mean, a lot of people who are like, oh, you should just adopt or, oh, do this. But the reality is not everybody's open to adoption, for a cancer survivor. And it's expensive.
Ah.
And you're already going through a treatment that costs,
Hmm.
I mean, thank God I had insurance, but I paid thousands of dollars out of pocket for my treatment. And that was with having really good insurance. So, it's a big financial hit when you go through this type of stuff. It's a hit in a lot of different areas. And I think that's something that some people don't recognize. And that's okay, because if you haven't been through it, you're not really going to understand it. But it's a disease that even when you're out of treatment, it's still impacting your life.
Right. And those around you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
it's
It's got to affect the caregivers, the people in the family. I mean, it's got to be so difficult.
it is, yes, yeah. Because in between all of that, my family's been hit hard. My dad was diagnosed less than a year after my bone cancer diagnosis with late stage multiple myeloma. So he made it 6 years before he died. And then one of my sisters and one of my nieces are also cancer survivors. So I always say this is not just my cancer story; it is my family story. When I come on and raise awareness, and that's my passion, is raising awareness to help others.
Right. And you do an incredible job at it. So,
Thank
well, we're
you.
going to take a short break. And when we come back from the break, I want to hear about your mindset and how you decided that that was the only way you were going to get through this. And I want to hear more about your plan, your determination, and the strong will that you do have. So we'll hear that right when we get back from the break.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Welcome back to Up Close and Empowered with Sonna Johns. Have a question for Sonna or a guest? Join us on the show at 888-346-9141. That's 888-346-9141. Now back to the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Up Close and Empowered. I'm Sonna Johns, and I'm talking with Heather Hall today, 3-time cancer survivor. Before we get back into our show, I do want to put out there, if there is someone that does have a question for Heather, I am going to give the number now, 888-346-9141. That number is 888-346-9141. If there is something that you would like to ask, so we can take that call. But before we move on any further, what I wanted to ask you, Heather, is, what was a typical day like when you were going through this? The emotions, relationships, just take us through what that's even like, because then we're going to get into the mindset and how you were able to overcome these challenges.
Yeah, so going through it a few times, it was a very different experience, particularly being 21, where, I mean, yes, you're an adult at 21, but I, had just was in college, finishing college. I was on my parents' insurance. I took my parents, I mean, thank God, like I can't express enough to you how amazing my parents were. I would not have gotten through that experience without my parents. And that was a very rough treatment. It was, I was sick. I mean, I was so sick one week. I think I lost like 6 pounds, 6 or 7 pounds in one week from being so violently ill. You know, it was a lonely experience. I was, most of my friends were still in college, and here I was, or they were getting jobs and moving on with their life. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm over here bald and, you know, learning how to walk again and all of that. So that one had a lot of its, you know, very hard, dark moments with it. I do think in some ways, I also, though, had the resilience of being young, where thinking, you know, which is interesting because when I was diagnosed, I will be totally upfront with you that I never thought I'm going to die. I remember thinking, well, this is going to suck. And okay, you know, I'm going to have to just go through this and get through it and then figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. Like I had that, you know, even back then I had like somehow I was able to like that optimism or whatever it is that I had inside of me, thank goodness, like really blossomed in that moment, because those dark places were dark and they were sad and they were scary. And I'm not gonna lie, it makes me kind of emotional just thinking back on that, because I think I look at that young woman 25 years ago and I think, oh my gosh, you know, if I could go back and just give her a big hug and say, you got it. But it was one of the things back then. I remember how vividly saying, when I survive this, like I want to help other people and I want to live my life to the fullest. And so then fast forward to being in my early 40s, a different experience for sure, because I was, you know, divorced, so single, living on my own, you know, doing all these things. Now I have a phenomenal support system, but it's different, you know, when you're living on your own and doing all of this stuff. And like I said, it took me so out of the blue. And it might sound funny because nobody ever expects, I think, to get cancer or any disease that they're going to get or whatever. But it was such a shock to me when I got that news that it was hard. I mean, I will probably say for the first week or two, I really struggled to get out of bed, and I just felt shattered in a million different pieces. And then a couple of days, I was just laying in bed thinking, okay, I have to make a choice on what I'm going to do. I'm either going to lay here and make this the most miserable experience of my life, or I'm going to live beyond cancer and I'm going to choose to get up, you know? So infusion days, for instance, when I went through breast cancer treatment, I had 4 infusions. They were one day like in the clinic. My mom or my sisters came with me. We made it fun. We laughed. We were just like, okay, this is not, I actually cold capped to save my hair. So that's like it's basically like a frozen cap you put on your hair and it freezes your hair follicles to try to stop the chemo from going through. And I did that. And so I was able to save 60% of my hair. So that was a pretty good distraction during infusion day, because I was so focused on, you know, how cold my head was, to get through that. But I thankfully had a job that was really, supportive and so understanding. But again, I mean, it still had its difficulties, because I can't tell you, I sat on my bathroom floor crying many days. I felt very lonely. It was hard to get through. And then, you know, with breast cancer, mine was hormone estrogen positive. So I'm on an inhibitor. I had to go into surgical menopause. I had to go through all these things. And then you start doubting yourself. You start having those feelings of unworthiness, like, oh my God, who's ever going to want to date me? Or, you know, how can I overcome this? Or, you know, just that, like I wish that when you finish treatment, it was all over, but it's not. It's just, it's a form of PTSD. It's a form of, there's certain restaurants I can't go to because I went there in between chemo treatments and I was like, oh, no, I can't get there. I'll get there someday,
Wow.
but I have to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
Oh, yeah.
little things.
I'm
Little,
sure it's definitely a trauma.
yeah.
I mean, it doesn't go away once you're healed, once you're cured. I mean, it's something that impacts your life forever.
It does. It changes everything. And, you know, as I mentioned, like losing my dad was a very pivotal, incredibly painful moment. Of course, like I had the best dad ever. And he was such a good man. And so, and I will say that it was hard at times for me being, I had survivor's guilt for quite a while, because here, even the week before he died, I had gone in for my annual checkup with my oncologist, and I got phenomenal news, right? Like, there's no sign of cancer, like everything's great. And I remember sitting in my parents' driveway thinking, oh, how do I go in and tell my parents, that when we know at that point that my dad's not going to make it. Now, thankfully, I remember my dad saying, he's like, don't even be that. Like, your news actually gives me peace and all of that. And I remember when he was dying a couple of days before, he said, do not let this cancer run your life. He's like, cancer didn't kill me. I'm making the choice that it's time. And he's, so I always appreciate that. And I remember him saying too, he's like, you have a smile that will change the world. So don't ever stop that smile. Don't ever do that. Sorry, I'm getting emotional just talking about him.
No, I am too, actually.
It was, yeah. So it's, it was a big thing for me. And so for many years afterwards, I did, and I do so much still, like with him in mind, thinking like, this is what he would do. My parents, I mean, they raised us, my sisters and I, to help other people and to really give back and serve in a positive way. And I also have learned that when we live our lives, whether it's me or you or anybody, but when we live our lives in a joyful way, when we live our lives in gratitude, it's contagious and it spreads. And I think, and I remind myself sometimes of that the greatest gift I think I could give my dad and my mom, who's thankfully very healthy and spunky and very much alive. The greatest gift I could give to people and myself, most importantly, is, focusing on living beyond this disease. I'm not going to let this disease run my life. I'm going to run my life. And it all comes down to, I really believe in choices. We all have a choice in how we react and respond to the things. So those are the things that I've decided to do.
Yeah, no, it's really amazing. I mean, not only your smile, but your heart, like your heart is really into this. And, even though it has changed your life, it's also opened up a lot of really beautiful things for you. And the fact that you're helping people, because I know that you have so many people that you've inspired and that reach out to you. And I know that you have like an online store. I mean, maybe you can talk about that for a minute, and the blog. We'll talk about that before we get into the mindset. But since we're on that subject now, because I know that so many people do reach out to you and they appreciate your support. So maybe share a few of those places where people can go and get some information, or maybe look at your store, your online store.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thanks for bringing that up. So my store, so when I went through my cancers, my life mantra kind of became today I choose. And I use it. And what it really, really came alive for me when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, because as I mentioned, I mean, that first week or two after that diagnosis, I was just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? What is happening here?
And wasn't that in the quarantine? Wasn't that
Well, it was in 19. So I finished treatment shortly before COVID hit.
Okay.
So that was, so that was another kind of mental punch, where it's like I went from treatment and then I was like, oh yes, I've got so much planned for 2020. I'm taking back, like I'm taking the world on. And then, but you're going to do it from your living room. So, so my mantra during that really became, I just was laying in bed and I thought finally, okay, you know what? I have a choice. I can stay here in bed and be miserable for this, or I can kind of say, no, I'm going to live my life the way I want to live my life. And what is my choice? So every day I started asking myself, what am I choosing today? And I would answer myself, today I choose. And whether it was joy or courage or laughter or adventure or strength, resilience, whatever it was. And that became my theme of the day. And what that did for me is that those days when I might have started feeling the darkness come in, I would acknowledge it. And then I would say, but today I'm choosing joy. And so then I would I would focus on something that was bringing me joy, whether it was sunshine, whether my, little niece texted me to say she loved me, whether even in the infusion room, when, my mom would just give me a hug, or she'd, she'd say something and we'd burst out laughing or whatever. So anyway, that mantra became so important to me. And then COVID hit and I started recognizing and seeing how much people were mentally struggling themselves or emotionally struggling. And I started sharing with people, well, this is my mantra and this is what it's doing for me. And then I just decided to get creative and I created affirmation cards. And so a whole deck of 52 cards. And then I went so far, I love journaling and I find great power in journaling. So I created a journal with writing prompts. And then that kind of just exploded into different things. So yeah, so then I just decided to start an online store. And that's Today I Choose, the website is todayichooseseries.com, but it has a whole list of things and I keep adding. In fact, I'm really excited. I'm getting ready to launch an I am affirmation card deck and a mindfulness card deck. So more things are coming to that. But, and that's been, having people, I've had more people reach out to me. What I really love is a number of people have said they give the cards and journal as gifts, that they're helping. And I think, oh my gosh, that just makes me so happy to know that we're spreading the love, that's always been
Oh my
goal.
gosh, that's the perfect gift, honestly. I mean, especially around the holidays or anytime to be able to give the I am cards or something that can inspire them or give them some motivation or intention of their day, a positive intention. So I love that. And is there a percentage that you also contribute to an organization?
I do. So typically at the end of the year, I do a percentage of my proceeds to 15% of my proceeds to a cancer charity that I have, good connection with, that I trust. I've been a volunteer and advocate for 25 years. So I've worked with a lot of different organizations and found a lot that are very passionate to my love. So I always want to give back. It's just a purpose that I want to do with my life. I'm so grateful and so joyful to be alive. I mean, every day I wake up and I just think, oh man, am I happy to be alive? There is not a moment that goes by that I don't feel gratitude. So so I just want to always be able to give back.
Wow. I mean, think about that. Just really think into that, being so close, not knowing what your future holds, and being so grateful to have a second chance. First chance, second chance, third chance.
Third chance.
Right. Third chance. I mean, it's really unbelievable.
Yeah. And it seems so simple when you say I'm happy to be alive, but I think it's often something that we take for granted, right? That we take for granted that breath. And I think our health is one of the number one things we take for granted until we have something that jeopardizes that health or something. And so so that's always been my passion. And I really try to make that as my message. And one of the really important messages for me, especially as a cancer survivor, but even if you're not a cancer survivor, is we talked a little bit that one of my themes was also living beyond cancer. And that's always, I love that theme. I adapted it in my, when I was 21, because, and it's whether you're in treatment or not in treatment or wherever you are, whether you're a caregiver or anybody who's been impacted by the disease, it's that we are living beyond this disease, even if you're in the middle of treatment. It's kind of like I was saying, when I was in the middle of infusion, my mom and I would be laughing, or when I went through bone cancer, I mean, I had a party a couple times in in my hospital room or it was just, okay, what am I going to do today? Or, in the middle of treatment, I would go to a Red Wings game, or I would, just something outside of it, because while it's probably the one thing I think about every day is, being a survivor, just because it obviously impacted my life. But it also, I'm so much more than a cancer survivor. And
I love that.
So much more than whether anybody, right? Whether you're, you've been divorced, or you're a mom, or, you're this or you're that. We're so much more than just one title. We're these beautiful people that can be so much. And we just have to embrace all of the things we can be.
That is beautiful. I am so glad that you shared that, because I love that. I am so much more. I mean, think about the power in that. I hope that everyone's listening to that. I am so much more than just this or just that, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it really does. I mean, I feel like it opens up so much in my life, at least for me personally, when I say that, I am so much more than this, or I am more than this, it opens you up to all of these opportunities or these possibilities, or, all of these things. And you just never know. I mean, the one thing about cancer is it has taught me that I have thrown my arms open to so many things. I have gotten out of my comfort zone, because quite frankly, sometimes if I'm getting nervous about a date or a job interview or whatever it might be, I think to myself, girl, you have cleared cancer. Pretty sure you can do
exactly.
Whatever.
Oh my God, exactly. In fact, I've said this on a few other shows. It's almost like the wisdom that we have, because it is wisdom. It's wisdom and challenges and survival for you. But when you think about it, if you're nervous about something or you're afraid of this or whatever, it's wait a minute. After
Yeah.
what I've been through, this is nothing. This
Yes.
is, I mean, I can totally do this.
Absolutely. And and words matter. I'm a big proponent of, I mean, I'm a word person, obviously with what I do for a living and my passion, but I'm a word person and words matter. And even like when I talk about cancer, I say I cleared cancer. I didn't say I had cancer, I have cancer or anything like that. I say I cleared it
Mm.
because boom, the second I got that diagnosis, it was like, well, it's gone. So, I mean, that is just how I approached it and it lightened up. It's amazing how the words that we use for ourselves and to others, how it can either heavy or it can lighten it.
Right. And it's the words that we choose to use because clearing does have a lighter, more
Mhm.
positive
Yeah.
feeling, energy about it.
Yeah.
So is this some of the things, are these some of the things that, and we're going to take a break in a second here,
Yeah.
but are these some of the things that you teach or that you actually speak on? Because I know you've done keynotes, you've
Yeah.
done seminars, you've done workshops, you've spoke out at organizations and things like that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that about the break, because I do want people to know that, and I know a lot of them do know this because everybody listening to this show is really into personal growth and personal empowerment. But,
Love
coming from you that, you've been through so much, you really had to really dig deep to
it.
find the positive side of
Mhm.
something, the silver lining, the faith, the
Mhm.
hope, the strength. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back right after that.
Welcome back to Up Close and Empowered with Sonna Johns. Have a question for Sonna or guests? Join us on the show at 888-346-9141. That's 888-346-9141. Now back to the show.
Hi, I'm Sonna Johns, back with Up Close and Empowered with Heather Hall, and we're talking about surviving and clearing cancer and life beyond cancer, and that it can be amazing. And Heather is a huge advocate for bringing self-awareness about and helping people with their mindset, not only if they have this disease or know somebody, but anybody that's going through life challenges in any way, shape, or form. So she is very passionate about teaching mindset and speaking out on mindset. And I thought that maybe you could share some of the things that you teach or what you talk about, maybe 2, 3, 5 things, whatever you feel that our listeners would really benefit from.
Absolutely. Well, what I love about focusing on the mindset is one is, we hear sometimes in society nowadays about like toxic positivity and everything. And so my belief is that you can still be positive and still address like the negative side, right? Like it's not, we don't want to dismiss, even when I talk about being positive during cancer treatment. I mean, make no mistake, that was the most horrific experience of my life. And it's a very negative thing. However, there's so much research that has been done on the fact that positive attitudes and gratitude and all of that, it actually helps improve everything. And interestingly enough, what I thought was most fascinating is that we actually train our brains to be negative. The more we like think it, the more we respond to it and all of that, we're training it. So we can do the opposite by training our brains to be positive. And I found that in all of the experiences that I have been through, I know my mindset is what has helped me get through everything, because our mindset affects our physical health, our emotional health. I mean, it affects every part of it. So it doesn't matter if you're going through cancer or, you're having a bad day, like a career, whatever it might be. I have people contacting me all the time, whether they're, struggling in their career or whatever. And I kind of mentor them and we talk about it. So some of my tricks is I'm really big on gratitude. And what I found is that every night, and I still do this, but I started this when I went through treatment, every night I use my journal and I will write down at least 3 things that I'm grateful for that happened in that day. So I'm focusing on the day. And sometimes I can write more than 3. And other times I'm like, oh, that was not really that good of a day. But at the end of the day, there's still always something we can be grateful for. You
Mhm.
could even write down, I'm alive and breathing right now. That's a massive thing to
Right.
be grateful for. But it could be the sun is shining. It could be this. So what happens is that it starts getting you into this habit of focusing on gratitude. So for me, I do it so often that I'll be in the middle of it. I was driving home today from a doctor's appointment and I was like looking and I was like, oh, I'm so grateful that, the sun is out, or I'm so grateful the song came on. I love it. And it's funny because it's just now natural for me to do it, but it instantly lightens my mood too.
Mhm.
So that's one strategy I do. And then I am also a big advocate of I am statements. They are, I think, especially we often, it's funny sometimes how we talk, we're so positive and really like coach and pep other people up. But how often are we not saying nice things to ourselves? You know, we have that internal voice that will be like, you're unworthy, or, oh my God, why did you do that? That was dumb, or, you know, this thing. So I like I am statements. And I will say, like, I think they're very, very powerful in changing our mindset. So it's, you know, saying, I am happy. I am good at, you know, whatever. I am, you know, those things. And I do it sometimes when I'm brushing my teeth. I look in a mirror and I'm thinking them out. I'm not really talking to brush my teeth, but, you know, I'm thinking them out loud. Or there's power in looking at yourself. I know some people have pushed back to me and said that's super awkward, but I think there's power in looking at yourself and saying, you know, I'll say, I am healthy. I am feeling good. And it's important to remember that it's okay to feel good. Like, even when you're in the middle of a challenge, even when you're struggling through something, it's okay to feel good. Like, give yourself permission to feel it, because the more we embrace and accept how good it is to feel good, it just becomes this natural thing. And then, you know, also, again, it comes back to that power of choice. As you know, we've talked about my mantra, today I choose, but it's that power of choice. So you can choose to feel good, but I mean, I get it. You can also choose not to. That's a choice too.
Right.
So
And some people have guilt about feeling good.
absolutely. Yeah. No, exactly.
You know, yeah, like the
Yep.
people,
Yeah.
you know, people pleasing too much and not
Yeah.
taking time out for self-care, that they actually have guilt about it, but it's okay.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, one of the workshops that I teach, which is, it's such an interesting workshop. It's actually on self-advocacy. And it's, you know, it's today I choose you is actually what I call it. And it's being a self-advocate for yourself in the sense of relationship boundaries, like even for your healthcare, it doesn't matter what your health history is. I mean, your health is your most important part. It's drawing boundaries when you're, you know, self-care, all of these things. And what's so interesting to me is when I teach this workshop, it's always interesting because I make it interactive and I'll ask questions and I'll do this. And the beginning of it, people are kind of like, well, I don't really want to do that because then I feel guilty, or you know, so we ease into that. And by the end, it's, you know, like, okay, what are you going to choose for self-care? And everybody's got an answer then, you know, it's like they're kind of into that. So it's interesting to see how, like you said, we sometimes resist taking care of ourselves. But if we don't take care of ourselves, we absolutely cannot take care of other people, whether you're in a relationship, you're a parent, you're a leader at, you know, job, friend, anybody, whoever, you just can't. If your own, you know, if you're not fulfilled internally, then you're not going to be able to help people externally.
100%. As we know, our inner world affects our outer world. So we have to be good within ourselves and definitely taking care of our mind, body, and soul. And I know that you also speak out on mental health issues. So a lot of these things that you are teaching and advocating they have to do with mental health, which is a big thing right now ever since COVID. I mean, it's always been around, of course, but it's stepped up a bit since COVID. So I want our listeners to know that that you're also a very good resource for that as well. And so what advice would you give someone that is either going through this type of situation, they actually have the disease, or somebody close to them? You know, what is the first thing someone should do? Where can they reach out? What are some good resources, and what's some good advice that you could tell them?
Absolutely. So for someone who's, you know, first diagnosed, I think my first advice would be take a breath. Like, just pause and take a deep breath, because it's really overwhelming. And there were many times, even when I was in the middle of treatment, one of my tricks was literally putting my hand on my heart and, you know, feeling that heartbeat and taking the deep breaths, holding and letting it go. But for me, feeling that heartbeat brought it all home, that it was like, okay, girl, we're here. Everything's gonna be fine because that heart is still beating. So, but then with that, there's a lot of different resources out there. I have a blog that I started about 15 years ago that I host a lot of, there's a ton of resources on my blog. In fact, people could go to, it's heathershangout.com. And it talks, I actually have a free resource for if you're newly diagnosed. But so it's important to make sure you're comfortable with your doctor, you know, you have the right diagnosis, you fully understand it. be in the question of everything. I ask numerous questions of every single doctor. In fact, I carry an orange notebook around to every doctor's appointment. And it's gotten to the point where some of my doctors are like, oh, where's your notebook? Don't you have any questions for me? They're so used to it. So, it's, again, just making sure you're fully informed. I think often we feel like we can't ask questions, but keep in mind, this is our life and this is our health. But with that, I always encourage people to bring somebody with them to a doctor's appointment so that you have two sets of ears. Because sometimes when you're getting news, you might want to tune out, or it might just be overwhelming. And so, like I always took my mom or my sisters or my dad with me, and they would always be, making notes or whatever. And then if you're a caregiver or a family or friend, my biggest advice is be supportive. Don't, I don't talk more than you listen. Don't,
I love it. I love that.
Yeah, I was like, yes.
Be there to support and listen, and just your presence of just caring.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
And everybody has an opinion. So when you are diagnosed, you hear an opinion on every decision you will ever make. I know when I had a lumpectomy, not a mastectomy, and a number of people were like, why didn't you have a mastectomy? And it was like, well, that wouldn't change my outcome. That's not what was wrong. And then I decided when I cold capped to save my hair, I was fascinated by I guess I'd say negative feedback, but people were like, oh, I think you'd look great bald. And I was like, well, I know I would, because I lost my hair for 15 months. And then finally I had to catch myself where I was like, oh my God, why am I justifying? Like, I don't have, and I started saying and said, thank you for your perspective, or thank you for your input, or thank you. So that's probably another really big piece of advice to somebody, just to say, you're going to get a lot. Some of it is incredibly helpful. I have had phenomenal advice, but I have had to learn how to, decipher it, because, and I always say that to me when somebody asks me, oh, did you have this treatment, or did you do this, or what would you do? I always say, I don't give out medical advice to anybody. I will share my story and what worked for me. That may not work for you. Cause like I said, I did not need a mastectomy. I had a lumpectomy, I chose that. So, but there's great organizations. Livestrong is one of them. American Cancer Society is another. National Coalition of Cancer Survivorships, phenomenal organizations, Immerman Angels. There's so many great organizations out there that will provide information, and they have Triage Cancer is a great free resources, legal stuff, employment stuff, all of that I highly recommend. And like I said, I have a ton of blog posts that lists a lot of information, fertility assistance, all of that. So that might be a good starting point.
So heathershangout.com.
Yes.
heathershangout.com. It's also your Instagram handle. And then you have some other sites, but you're just going to start with that. So if anybody needs to reach out, they can contact you at that blog and ask any information or whatever. If anybody wants to book you for their event, they can reach out to you there as well.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Yeah. Thank you.
So in closing, so we have just a few minutes left. I'm just wrapping up here. What words of wisdom, based on everything that you've gone through, like what would you want to leave our listeners with today, based on everything you've gone through, all the wisdom, all the survival? What are the words that you would want to leave with them today?
Love your life and live your life. I mean, remember that you have choice, so choose to throw your arms open to the world, choose to be in the question, choose to go after and be grateful for it, and really focus on the possibilities, try to train your brain to focus on the possibilities over. We live in a society that tends to lean into negativity and judgment and all of that. And so my thing is, what if we could be bold enough to be different?
Yes, I love that. I love that. Well, and as I mentioned earlier, Heather and I are in a women's group organization that is a platform across the country. We have workshops, and there's all types of modalities. There's therapists, coaches, healers. It's really a wide array. And so for those of you that want to check out that's the shehiveofficial.com. And also myself, so Sonnalife.com for people that would like to reach out to me. If you'd like to work together or just have a discovery call, please feel free to contact me on my website, which is Sonnalife.com, Sonna, Sonnalife.com, sorry, Sonnalife.com. And also, I'd like feedback. I love to hear feedback from the show and what you like, what you'd like to hear more about. It's always great to hear that. And in next week, so I'm really excited. This is a completely different, every show I try to mix it up a little bit, give a variety in the world of empowerment. And next week I have a special guest that's in the health and fitness arena and was an owner of a very big franchise that many of you will know. So I'm really excited for you to hear her story because it's very interesting. So that will be next week. And I just want to thank Heather for being here today on the show. I truly enjoyed your presence, your story, your inspiration. I'm sure I can speak for everyone. And just thank you so much. And thank you, listeners. Thank you for supporting the show. And with that, have a great rest of the day.